It seems like there are just so many people getting more stupid and degenerate every single day. So I really feel like I'm almost repeating myself on everything that I'm making videos on. Much just like AI this and AI that. You open up the internet and you look at stuff about not AI shit, and it's basically just like stupid people everywhere. So in this video, I decided to take a step back, and instead of talking about any of that kind of bullshit, I would like to talk about something that allegedly lives in the woods and has also avoided being proven, but still is consistently seen pretty much all over the world. In some way, shape, or form, people all over have said that they have seen beings just like this one. And that's why I've decided to start making this new series on the channel where we start unraveling some of the more stranger things in the world and some of the most mysterious beings that have been said to have encounters with human beings throughout history. And today I figured we would start with one that pretty much everybody has at least heard of. He's really big, he's hairy, he lives in the woods. He's also been selling beef jerky to Americans for years now. That's right, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about Bigfoot. So, what exactly is Bigfoot? Also known as Sasquatch, this is the name that's commonly given to supposed large humanoid-like creatures that are said to inhabit the woods, particularly in North America is where Bigfoot or Sasquatch has been sighted. And the general description is pretty much what you would expect. Probably a taller Chewbacca from Star Wars, and probably a lot beefier. We're talking like an enormous muscular bipedal, that means walking on two legs, creature that's covered in head to toe with tons and tons of hair. It probably has really sharp teeth. Basically like an 8 foot tall human being with the proportions of a wrestler who's got enough hair to make a grizzly bear jealous of how much hair he has. And then basically convince this thing that its primary objective is to basically make people think that they've saw it and to not get video or photo captured by any of these people and their stupid little square devices. And honestly, he's been incredibly successful at that. And to me, I think that's one of the biggest concerns about the Bigfoot whole conspiracy thing here, because we have satellites and we have drones, we have cameras, trail cameras even, cameras on literally fucking everything, cameras on our glasses now. And some of these cameras are so powerful that you could literally see bacteria and shit living on your fucking phone before you could ever see a Bigfoot get caught on one of these cameras. Bigfoot continues to exist within this weird technological blind spot where apparently nobody can get a picture, and every Bigfoot photograph looks like it's basically a man holding a magnifying glass over a potato and like trying to record a fucking coat rack from 400 feet away. And it really looks fucked up. Like it's very blurry. Like you never really see a nice, crisp 4K photograph of this. You get just an enormous hairy blob that's kind of fucking shook up looking. But the idea of a mysterious giant man living in the woods is much older than the Bigfoot figure itself. There are several old stories that we can look back on, and I feel like that's one of the most interesting things about the Bigfoot sightings is the stories about a strange, hairy, giant being that aren't really exclusive to North America. It's all over the world. There are tons of legends and traditions that are told involving a wild human-like being in many different parts of the world. Like in the Himalayas, you have the Yeti, which is basically a white Bigfoot. You have the Yowie in Australia, which is basically a fucking, I don't know, Bigfoot that spins backwards or something. And of course, there are different traditions and cultural beliefs that kind of signify how these beings came into existence, but I feel like most of those are just speculations from human beings trying to guess as to where these things came from in their specific areas. But it is a reoccurring idea to have something living out in the wilderness that looks strangely human, but is definitely not a normal human being. And that concept has apparently been a rent-free thing in humanity's brain for a very long time now, even before it could really be documented or even before there could be pictures or anything taken of it. There's been spread out sightings of these things all over. There's also a story about a man named David Thompson and the giant footprint, which is the earliest recorded idea. It was like 1811 that this happened, where they believe that there was some evidence recorded for this Bigfoot creature. One of the oldest accounts here, this very old account that we're talking about, is brought up a lot in Bigfoot discussions, and it comes from an explorer named David Thompson, who back in 1811, while traveling through the Rocky Mountains, recorded finding very strange and very large animal tracks in the snow. And whenever he measured these footprints, they were around 14 inches long and 8 inches wide, which is really, really big feet, and obviously where the name comes from. But there's one thing that's pretty interesting about the situation. Thomas himself didn't say, guys, I found Bigfoot and like come up with that idea. He actually at first thought it was just like a very large grizzly bear and wasn't really thinking anything of it. And I think that he was just very, very shocked and thought that it was a normal kind of footprint from a normal animal, basically. But the people that were traveling with him apparently had their own interpretations of the animal. So this isn't really a smoking gun or a Bigfoot. It's kind of like two sides in the same group that sort of looked at it both ways. But it does show something pretty important here. It shows that people traveling through these enormous wilderness areas were encountering strange track and animals that were difficult for them to identify for various reasons. And it was at least strange even to the animals that were mistaken for potentially being this if it could have been another animal. And like when you're standing in the middle of the Rocky Mountains in 1811, I guess there's not really an exact way to just look it up on a smartphone and let you know like why does this animal have a 14-inch foot and if that's normal. You're kind of just standing there thinking like that's probably fine. I feel like they maybe couldn't have a way to question it and maybe just thought that that's how big it could be. Also, that means that there's no photography or anything of this foot, but this guy and his group did talk about it. You know, if it does look like a human foot, kind of, that maybe it could just be a really big bear they haven't seen before. Not necessarily a Bigfoot, but it's definitely certainly one hell of a story. Which there is also the story of Jacko, which is the Bigfoot that probably wasn't actually a Bigfoot, but instead was probably just some innocent guy that got fucking kidnapped because he looked funny, I guess. This is one of the weirdest stories that come out of the 1800s as well. Quite a bit later in the 1800s, not in 1811, but actually in 1884, when there was a British Columbia newspaper that had wrote a story called The Creature Called Jacko. And supposedly this creature was captured near Yale in British Columbia. And the story described Jacko as something between a man and a beast. It says that he was supposedly covered in incredibly dark hair, was also very, very strong, and looked somewhat like a gorilla in appearance. And if you're a Bigfoot enthusiast, I'm sure that sounds amazing. Basically just a spooky, humanoid, very hairy creature that was captured in British Columbia. Like, it definitely sounds like a jackpot for somebody into Bigfoot sightings because it's just a big ass hairy creature that has like superhuman strength. Like, that's basically fucking Bigfoot Christmas in the 1800s, I'm sure. But there is one problem that happened with this whole situation, and that's the fact that it appears to have been a hoax. There are other newspapers that reported that there was no such creature that had actually been captured, and that the original newspaper had apparently been fooled. So the story of Jacko is probably not actually literal evidence of a Bigfoot being captured in any situation. Now, I don't actually know if this was a real person or not that they had captured. I don't know if they were just lied to. I don't exactly know all the details to the story of Jacko, but imagine being just like a completely fictional, very hairy monster and just being dragged into like a scandalous newspaper story. But I do hope he was real because if he wasn't, I just kind of imagine there being like a newspaper reporter that came up to the dude that started the whole thing and was just asked like, sir, what did you see? A hairy beast. And he's like, how hairy? He's like, extremely hairy, dude. It's definitely fucking hairy. And then he asks the name and is told Jacko. Who the fuck came up with that story to put it out and say, "Hey guys, we found this monster. Let's name him Jacko." Like that's so stupid. But that definitely didn't kill the Bigfoot legend. And I think that that's what makes it so interesting is cuz even after there's so many stories like this that have been debunked, the legend has not disappeared whatsoever cuz there's a lot of people that definitely believe they saw a Bigfoot. And people keep on just continuing to report encounters that they've had. And there aren't always people that claim it was a blurry shape like 700 yards away. There are people who have claimed to see the creature extremely close, actually, which brings us to a very recent example. There's still shit going on today. On July 5th, 2026, there was a man named Kevin Clemas, and he reported seeing what he believed to be a Bigfoot in Voluntown, Connecticut. And according to his account, he was driving through a heavily wooded area at about 1:45 in the morning when a huge bipedal creature suddenly crossed the road in front of him. Now he says, when I say huge, he wasn't describing some like slightly tall dude. He's talking like 8 to 8.5 feet tall. And he described it as having very long brown hair, extremely broad shoulders, very long arms, a muscular build, and short legs compared to its torso. But apparently the legs weren't that short because apparently it crossed the road in basically 2 steps, just like a whole street. That means, like, first step, he could have been right in the middle of the road, which is pretty terrifying to think about. Like, imagine driving through the woods at 1:45 in the morning and thinking about getting home, listening to some music, fucking going to bed, and then all of a sudden there's like a giant fuzzy dude crosses the road like he's late for work. I feel like I'd probably fucking poop myself. I feel like I would probably get the fuck out of the woods and I would probably pull over because I feel like that would make me think I'm hallucinating or something. And this is where this becomes one of the more strange sightings of a Bigfoot, honestly, because Clemence basically said that this was a cone-headed Bigfoot. Clemence describes the top of its head as appearing as somewhat cone-shaped with an extremely pronounced jaw. The Bigfoot Research Organization, BFRO, has classified the report as a Class A sighting. Now, so does not mean that scientists have officially confirmed that Sasquatch exists, but it does mean that in this particular sighting that they had with Clemence, they believe the sighting to be a relatively strong eyewitness report on its own classification system that, of course, they make up. I don't know how strong of a statement that is, but that is an important distinction to make here because there's a huge difference between someone reporting to just see Bigfoot and Bigfoot exists. But they do look at this as a pretty strong statement here. But between those two statements, like the first one definitely happens, but the second one isn't exactly true. And that's the biggest mystery with this whole entire thing. There's never really been even hair or a DNA sample, a body, or any other sort of like physical evidence that's proving that this creature actually exists or has existed at all. Local authorities also did not report receiving any kind of independent reports confirming that there was a giant bipedal animal in the area. So we're pretty much just left with the eyewitness accounts and the people that have claimed to see it, but they were like the only ones around, it seems like. I haven't seen anything where it seems like a whole group of people were saying they all saw it at once. And there's still no physical proof if this being actually exists or not. There could be reasons as to why these things can't be caught on camera. There could be reasons as to why there's no evidence or no proof. And that's the thing, is it's kind of been given its own superpower to basically avoid ever being proven at all. So if it never happens, it could just be because of that, or it could be because those people that made that up are coping. And that's the biggest problem with Bigfoot, is if it is real, where the fuck are they? Like, they're not showing themselves. Tons of people have trail cameras, tons of people are living out in the wilderness, and we all have the technology to be able to catch evidence of these things if it's possible. Hunters even have like very high powered nighttime cameras that can be used to see things at all times of day, and there are drones that can fly over the forest. There's also satellites that can consistently be looked over and checked to see if there's any kind of anomalies that people are seeing. We even have cameras that are watching our every fucking move nowadays. So if there is a giant 8 foot tall creature that's wandering around in the woods, you may be asking why we haven't found any actual evidence. That's where these theories start getting really, really strange, because some people believe that this creature may possess extraordinary intelligence, which I know you may not initially be thinking about when you think of like a big ape, giant fucking creature dude that lives in the woods. But there are people that say that they have incredibly sharp senses, and there are also stories that claim that they have night vision, which I feel like is more believable because they're like animals, and also people that describe them as extremely strong, which also makes a lot of sense to me if they're very ape-like. But there are some much more speculative theories about Bigfoot as well. Some people even believe that they are able to mimic sound or even other people's voices, kind of like you would think a Wendigo or something like that would be able to do, or even throw its voice like a fucking ventriloquist. There are also some stories that further suggest that Bigfoot may possess even more abilities like psychic or telepathic abilities, and even the ability to talk to people through their brain with its brain. And that's where we're entering the deepest side of the Bigfoot swimming pool now, because we go from maybe there's a giant unidentified primate, like monkey type man, to perhaps him being more like a fucking wood sage or something like that, a more mystical, like knowledgeable creature that has telepathy and is also very big and strong and scary at the same time. Which at that point, it also makes me wonder if Bigfoot isn't studying us just as much as we're trying to study it. And there's also some reports that get a little bit crazier because the reason that we may not be able to get it on camera is actually due to the cloaking theory. Some people have suggested that Bigfoot may have some sort of ability to remain hidden from humans using some kind of cloaking, which isn't really that far outside of believability because it's similar in movies like Alien versus Predator that it mimics that kind of behavior where it sort of like turns itself translucent or more difficult to see. And there's even military technology now that is able to do very similar things to what we're talking about. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility to believe that something could mimic this kind of effect. Obviously, there's no scientific proof of any of this, especially the fucking cloaking thing where he can become invisible. I feel like that makes it difficult to get that if it is true, but I do understand where people come up with this idea, honestly, because if you're assuming that this creature is very real, but it's not been able to be caught on camera or found, I feel like you have to find a way to explain why that's so difficult. Maybe it's actually thinking outside the box. Maybe it's got these special abilities. Maybe it's thinking hard enough to know to try to avoid humans because of what human beings would do to it at this point. Maybe it only lives in extremely remote areas. Or maybe these witnesses that we've been talking about have just been misidentifying random animals and we don't really know. Maybe sometimes this is people seeing very large bears standing straight up in the woods. Maybe some of the sightings are hoaxes. Maybe some of them are just people making mistakes. Or maybe there's something we just don't understand about this cryptid. And honestly, I think that might be the appeal of why cryptids in general are very interesting. I feel like you're sitting there and you're trying to explain something, but it kind of just like always keeps you on the edge of your seat and you can never really find a satisfying answer to all of it because there's not evidence that's been found, but there's still sightings consistently. And it's very, very strange. And this is where things get even more interesting to me because there are people who do connect these Bigfoot like creatures and other cryptids to stories about giants and mysterious beings that have been throughout history, even biblical texts as well. And one of these theories has been brought up in many circles that connects these creatures to Nephilim. And the idea is that these creatures that we see today are just descendants of these men of renown and could somehow be connected to these strange giant humanoid creatures or other cryptids that we encounter today. And I do want to be clear here, there's not actually archaeological or biological evidence that is demonstrating that Bigfoots are descendants of Nephilim, but I don't feel like there would necessarily be. But as a whole, this is completely speculative. There's no like proof that you can just look up and find on the internet, that is. But it is definitely fascinating, and it makes sense to me that these stories would seem like they overlap, honestly, because there are a lot of ancient cultures that come even before the 1800s that tell stories about these giants as well and the people that they fought and describe creatures in the woods that could throw their voice and could do the things that are speculated to be very similar to the things people claim Bigfoot does today. Stories about wild men who need to be basically given sacrifices in order to not murder half of villages, and also people reporting mysterious humanoids in the forest. And thousands of years later, we're still sitting around and talking about the giant hairy dude that's hiding in a tree somewhere. And to me, I think that that could mean that it's real, or it could mean that humanity just has really clung on to these theories and has never let go, honestly. I mean, I think that it comes from people's curiosity, so it makes sense to me. I don't think it's just crazy people, but I don't really feel like there's enough evidence to confidently say that yes, it is real. And I've never personally had a sighting like this. Like, I also know that there's no body that has been at least something that we could look at or something that we have been confirmed of or any kind of skeleton or any kind of like universally accepted DNA evidence. So we don't really have like a clear, independently verified photograph or anything that really resembles what could have been a living specimen or anything in a zoo anywhere. That would be crazy if one day we have a Bigfoot in a zoo. I feel like that would be kind of weird, but that's really as far as we know because there is always the idea that the government may have one and and they may confiscate shit like that immediately after it's discovered. Who knows? There may be like a secret Bigfoot facility somewhere in Nevada. And honestly, like if the government really has one, I just want to know whether they're giving him good health care or not. Like I feel like they really should. Because I mean, he's one of a fucking kind. He sounds like he's pretty smart, and I feel like if they're employing like basically a giant brainiac humanoid hairy monster to be part of the US government and also to be looked at and tested potentially, they should at least be giving him some kind of benefits. All jokes aside, all of the lack of evidence has really been something that's caused a lot of roadblocks within the community, and it's been a big problem for the hypothesis of these Bigfoot sightings and determining whether or not they're actually true or not. But at the same time, the number of reports throughout history is pretty undeniably interesting, and I don't feel like it would overlap so much if there wasn't some truth to it, or maybe it's just like a common thing for humans to be fooled by specific kinds of things that they're seeing in different environments to just look like big humanoid monsters. I don't know. I guess that could be a true thing and a very weird coincidence. But one thing we do know is that people have definitely been telling stories of these mysterious creatures in remote wilderness areas for generations, and it looks like they're not slowing down or stopping anytime soon. And there are a lot of these witnesses who are absolutely convinced that what they saw was not a bear or a normal person, or really anything else that they could explain in a normal way. I don't know. Maybe it is real. Maybe it's like some kind of undiscovered primate that's in a lot of places. I really don't know. It could also be just a collection of exaggerated animal stories or like strange encounters that are actually hoaxes. And maybe the truth is out there and we'll figure that out one day. I really don't know. But that is something I want to go about exploring in these new videos that I make during this series. It's not necessarily looking at like how do we prove that Bigfoot or another type of cryptid exists, but I want to look at how long these stories have been being told and also if they overlap in some way with other types of stories throughout history, because there is a lot of overlap with things, even in the Bigfoot's case, which you might not think that at the beginning, but there really is. But realistically, like whether or not Bigfoot or any other creature exists or not, like Bigfoot has survived generations. Tons and tons of sightings of footprints and newspaper reportings, eyewitnesses, like blurry photographs, the same with a lot of other things we're going to talk about as well. Crazy documentaries, even on this, beef jerky commercials. Like Bigfoot has somehow become one of the most recognizable monsters on Earth. And honestly, if there is a real 8 foot tall hairy creature living somewhere out in the woods, I really hope he's doing all right because he's famous. Like he really is. I hope he's got him a nice little cave. I hope he's got him like a Costco membership and can like get shit DoorDashed or something. I don't know. Maybe he's found a way to watch videos on himself and keep up with what human beings are doing in that way to be able to understand like what they believe and how to avoid us, I guess. I don't know. But one way or another, if he is real and he is super smart, I bet he's out there thinking about the fact that like these dumb fucking not as hairy idiot short ass humans cannot fucking find me. That's probably how I would feel if I was Bigfoot, honestly. But I would love to know if you guys are interested in things like this. I would like to unravel other mysteries and learn a lot more about things. I want to go about them in the same way I'm doing this video, just like one by one. But let me know what kind of things you're interested in like this. It doesn't have to be a specific creature. It could also be like unexplained things that happen or just occasionally completely ridiculous stuff. I don't know. We can look into whatever. Welcome to this new series. I hope you enjoyed it. This is my first video like this, so it may be a little weird, but seriously, welcome to the woods. Welcome to this series. I hope you enjoyed it a whole lot, and I will see you guys in the next one that I make.